Eagle Scout patches in particular are collectible, and what I've discovered is that people don't know what they have or how to describe it. And my book stopped in 2000, and there's been 5 different major types that have come out since 2000, and eBay and everything, people are just making up their own whatever. And so what we don't have is a cataloging way to let people know exactly what kind of eagle patch there is. And so Jim and Ron and I have spent some time trying to put together a new catalog system like we did for the Eagle medals, so that people will be able to put on eBay or wherever they are in their communication a particular code, and that code will tell you exactly what the patch is. And so what we're going to do is run through that code, and what I've given to you in paper form is the layout of that code, and you can sort of track along with it. If you have a pen and you're looking at your paper, the only change that there is that under the type 3 there is a code that says KHA that you need to change to GRN, because we're not using the term khaki any longer. It will now be green, so that's clear in people's minds. So we're just going to run through, and as we go, if you have questions or you comment, but primarily what we want you to do is be impressed by what we've done, but more importantly what we want to make sure is that the code system we're putting together makes sense, so that it can be adopted and used throughout the hobby.
Okay, give me one more time what you replaced KHA with.
GRN for green.
GRN.
At the present time, there are 14 major varieties that we've been able to identify. And then there are subsets under that. But if somebody wanted to just put together an eagle collection to show what's out there, Bob, you might want to take a piece of paper here. What you would end up with is 14 patches to show the 14 varieties or types. The first patch was done in 1924, and it was not on uniform, but it was on a sash. As the boys were getting prepared to go to the 24 Jamboree, they brought them to New York. They gave them 2 new uniforms, and for the first time a merit badge sash was developed, and on that sash, if they were an eagle, was the first eagle patch. What we're doing is dividing the patches between cut edge and rolled edge. And today the way it's been done is type 1 and type 2 have been the cut edge, and type 3 and on up has been the rolled edge. We're now saying, because of a variety of things that we've discovered, that we're splitting what used to be type 2s into type 2 and type 3, and then the rolled edges will start with type 4. The cloth colors that we're going to use in the cut edge are now tan, white, blue, olive, and green. We're getting rid of the khaki, and we're not talking about khaki or olive khaki. We're just identifying 5 basic colors of the cloth material. 24 is when we introduced the first of the patches, and the type 1 patches, there's tan, white, olive, and blue are the only 4. There's no green. Tan, white, olive, and blue. The material that was used was a heavyweight pre-depression cloth, and on the back of the material, if you turned it over, there was a seal on some of the material and lines that were inked. So you could literally see the raised edges of the material that got inked as they produced the material. And every so often there was a stamp of the seal, and you'll see those in a second. What we decided to do was code with 3 letters. So if you saw on a code 1 tan 1, that would mean type 1 tan color cloth and the first variety on tan. And this is a tan 1, this is a 1 tan 1. And the distinguishing characteristic is that the scroll breaks through and there is a knot. This is the one that appeared on the sash in 24. Very limited variety, not many of these around for people to pick up. And when you do get one, if you didn't just luck into it, the price tag on these today is somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000. There were 56 sashes, and that was in 24, so you can imagine what you're dealing with. And not all of those sashes had eagles on them. Not all 56 kids were eagles. The Type 1 Tan 2 has the same characteristic, the scroll, but it has no knot.
Where was this found at? Where was this found? Was this issued? It wasn't on the sash.
It was not on the sash. This is one that was issued off sash.
Okay.
And I don't have any idea how many of them were. From what I know at this point, there are fewer of these in collection than there is the one with the knot. Then the common one that everybody collects and it's available, we call the 1 Tan 3, and it has the scroll stopped at the circle. There is no knot, and there is thin embroidery, that sharp thin embroidery, and then there's this thick embroidery and the doll look. But we've decided not to try to break those up because in the 20s, embroidery was not necessarily all that controlled. And so by thread weight or thread intensity on the thread, you could get a thinner look or you could get a fatter look. And so that's why we're not going to change those. Now, distinctively on the Type 1, Tan 1, Tan 2, the stitching in the oval is completely different than the stitching on the Tan 3. So if you miss the scroll going through the whatever, that's a much better way to do it. The problem is sometimes these are on things and you can't take them off, and so you can't look at the back. But if you can see the back, that's the distinctive quality of that. Where the common one, the back is the thread that just goes on and on. And then this is the seal. See the seal on the left? And you can see above the seal the printed black line. See how they are the twill of the material? When you literally look at the material, you can see that ink, black ink. Depending on how much washing there's been done, there is a little bit more and a little bit less of the ink. There is a Sea Scout white, and there is a Sea Scout blue. And then in 1930 approximately, the tan material became olive in color, and from 1930 to 32 there is an olive color. That's a more difficult piece to find than the tan when you're looking to try to get the varieties, because it was only out for a couple of years. But in the 30s there were a lot more eagles than there were in the 20s, and so maybe it balances out. The tan, or the OLV, for olive, the scroll ends and there's no knot. And Type 2s were introduced in 33. The design changed, the BSA was taken off, and the words were put in the oval around it. The dye colors are white and olive and blue only for the Type 2s. There's no tan, it's just olive, white, and blue. Material is heavyweight, similar to what the Type 1s were. It's printed, and when you hold it up to the light, the patch, if you hold it up to a bright light, there's no light that comes through it. It's tight weave, so there's no light that comes through. There is depression cloth that is used. We have not found an example of an eagle patch in depression cloth, but we do have examples of Life and First Class and Star. So the assumption is maybe there's an eagle, but also the possibility exists that they had made enough eagles that they didn't need any more for the short time of the depression cloth. So we don't know yet on that. And then there's a lightweight cloth, and it's on-printed. So later in the 30s, as we were approaching wartime in the later 30s, the materials were less available because they were making uniforms and doing other things. And so instead of having a heavier material, they made the thread thinner, and the materials were less of a tighter weave, and so it shows up differently. And that one, when you hold up and look at it, you look straight through, the light just shines right through the patch. So the heavyweight material looks like what you see on the left, and the lightweight material looks like you see on the right, and the depression cloth is not found yet. The only difference between depression cloth and lightweight is they're the same weight, but the depression cloth has got printing on the back, and the lightweight does not.
And the trade of printing is the lines and the seal.
That's the lines and the seal.
And they always come together? Because on that one example,
No.
you had lines and seal.
Now the
And
seals on the material are stamped periodically, and you can get 2 or 3 patches out of the cloth without touching the seal.
But on that roll, somewhere there's going to be a seal.
Yep.
There weren't rolls with lines only.
Right. There's lines on everything, but not seals. No. And they stopped printing the lines and the seals in 1935, so that's approximately when they stopped using the depression cloth and when they stopped using the the heavyweight, and went to just extensively lightweight. There you can see the seal of the line, and you can see what it looks like on printed. Now the distinguishing characteristic of the Type 2, aside from the cloth, is that Type 2 is all done with silk thread. So when you look at the silk thread on the back, you can see how loose it is, as opposed to the cotton, which can be pulled really tight. See the looseness? Now that's on printed cloth. There is a lightweight unprinted Type 2, but white, but we have not discovered yet a Type 2 heavy printed or depression cloth white. So again, we're not quite sure that maybe the Type 1s, when they were made, there was enough of them because there were so few Sea Scouts, that carried through until they made this one. Or there might be the heavyweight or the depression cloth, we've just not seen it yet. And then there's the Type Blue. And then there is a heavy printed olive, 33 to 35. There should be a depression cloth lightweight with printing like we're looking, but we don't know for sure. Again, it's the question of the depression cloth. It exists in the lower ranks, but we don't know in the Eagle. And then there's a heavyweight on-printed and a lightweight on-printed that is much later, 36 to 37, 38 to 39. And we identify those as 2 OLV3 and 2 OLV4.
Those are very distinctive when you look at them, because it's like looking at corduroy. The whales are wider apart, like you have in corduroy, on the lightweight than it is on the heavyweight.
In 39, the Boy Scouts said no more imported silk to be put on the patches, and they went to a cotton patch. And that's one of the reasons why we distinguished also between 2 and 3. That's the real distinguishing mark. Cotton and silk is the place that you begin with. The dye colors for this are tan, white, olive, and green, and then there's the blue wool felt. The fine weave, when you look at the way it's been woven together, the weave is over 2 and is under 2 and over 1. So that when the cloth, the strands are put this way, when the weave goes through, it goes under 2, over 1, under 2, over 1, and it's tightly put together. It's a smaller thread, and so it can be drawn up very tight. This is what we used to call sand twill. Merit badges and other things that have been identified as sand twill. We're now going to redefine that as fine twill. Lightweight is a standard diameter, and it's 3/1, and it's loose. So when you hold it up to the light, you can see right through it. This is the fine twill, or the sand twill. You see how tight it is? You see how it's just over 2, under 2, and over 1? I don't have an example of the lightweight to put up. I can only tell you that we think it exists, but I don't have an example of that. Now the war cloth, the thread is standard. It's 2/1 weave, and it's loose, and you can see right straight through it. And the post-war cloth is a smaller thread, 3/1 weave, tight, but the light does shine through that one as well.
Another feature of the war cloth is, since it's such loosely woven, they had to put a lot of starch on it.
We'll get to that. Hang on.
Okay.
So here's a 2/1 war cloth. See how loose it looks? By comparison to the 2/1 of the fine twill that you saw. Now this is the post-war cloth. And there's the glue. Now this is the one we call the sand twill or the fine twill. See how tight it looks? That's a very difficult patch to find. It was only around a short time. Because of the fineness of the thread, if you didn't put anything on the back of it, it would have been limp. Very fragile, very limp. So this is when they introduced starching. So the patch had starch on the back to stiffen it. But when you put that on the uniform and wash it, the starch goes away. So the only way that you really know you have a legitimate piece is to have it in close to mint condition, or in a condition where you can still see the starch. There are no plain backs other than the blue serge or the blue wool felt. Everything else has got starch on it in the type 3s. Or gauze, that you'll see in a minute. There is a starch back white that's a fine twill. There's the blue starch back, and then there's a white back thread, light cloth starched for 42-43. We don't know of a black thread starched back, light cloth. Could exist, but we don't know. But we do know that there's a war cloth starch, white background, and a war starch black with black thread in the background. Yep.
What's the purpose of the white and the black? I mean, is the black just the locking thread?
But what was available during the war?
But yeah, but what purpose? Because it doesn't show through the front. So
No, it doesn't.
It's a bobbin thread.
It's the backing of when you're doing embroidery, you've got to have 2 pieces of thread. This is the bottom piece. So since these are all starched and they're all olive, we're doing 3/1 or 3/2 starched, and then the A, B, C, D indicates the threads and so on, but it holds it all in the olives. And then there is a starched back green. Now this is the one that we've always called the khaki. It's on post-war material, late 40s into the 50s. Well, the starch back doesn't go that far, except that there's gauze back that comes in. The starch back could carry on until they ran out. You know how they do that. The war cloth Sea Scout white we did not have at the time the pictures were being made, but we have surfaced, and that one does exist. And the post-war gauze also exists.
You know, if you wash that patch, you get rid of that model's yellowing starch look.
Hey, Chris? What kind of soap should I use?
The starch did yellow over time.
It did.
So you could have a mint patch, but it looks like it hadn't been stored right.
And the way you can tell it's mint, and if it is yellow, it is as stiff as a board. Unless you've pasted or something to it.
You could bleach it too. It'd come up better that way.
Sure, you could do that.
You could do that.
You wouldn't have to use soap that way.
Yeah.
Should I use a brush to put it on? Gauze back, and then this is the post-war cloth gauze back green. Now let me stop at that point and ask, does it make sense? You're all experienced people. Is this flow for you? Does it make sense? Does it seem like it might be usable?
What we're trying to do here is, you're saying we're going awfully detailed, but we want to give everybody all the detail, and then you can choose what you want to collect. Do you want to go to all this detail, or do you just want a representative one of each type? You know, you can collect any way you want to collect, but we want to have available for everybody the total concept of the patch.
And what we've discovered is that it's not just the eagle patches, but this whole cloth thing that we're talking about is in all of the insignia, it's in all the ranks, and it's in the merit badges. Those of you who have been collecting merit badges, this is all going to come out, and you're going to find that there were merit badges in all these various levels as well. But not all the merit badges are in all of the levels. So you don't get a complete set of sand twills, you don't get a complete set of war cloth, because they made enough in one to carry over the couple years that they were using something else, and so they don't show up. So collecting is going to be fun to try to figure out in merit badges which one exists and which one don't. And we're doing the same thing with the eagles. We've identified probably 4 on the list that we're not sure exist. We're not saying they don't exist, we're just saying we haven't found them yet. Because about the time you tell them that they don't exist, someone's going to drag one out and show you and say, yeah, it does, and then you're embarrassed. So we're just going to say we haven't discovered it yet. And this is so new to us. I mean, this is the first that we've rolled out this whole concept to the collecting community in the eagle patches, so there's a lot yet to be found.
Hey, Terry,
Yep.
on that, I didn't hear you make any comment about whatever you call the one, the very early badge where the smile comes out over.
Yep.
What about the chances of finding one not on a sash?
Chances are not real high. And particularly not finding one that's in mint condition that wasn't on a stash. We have found them folded, 1 or 2 that are folded, which means that they probably were on. But the thing that's really the strange one is that number 2, where there's no knot.
Yeah, well, the reason I ask is the first one I found with it out over the edge was not on a sash.
Yep.
You know, and it came out of a collection in California and San Francisco where the mother had purchased a set of extra stuff and framed it for her kid. The kid didn't have much to do with it, you know what I mean? And then later it turned up on an estate sale and made its way to me. But I just...
And then after it made itself to you, it made itself to me.
Yes, it did.
That's the one that's in my collection, is the one that was in House collection. So I didn't know that story. That's helpful to know.
Yeah, it was never on a sash, and it, you know, hadn't been sewn on. And he had a whole set of everything like that. My mother was a little bit pathologic or something.
And that was the one without knot that the smile broke through. That's the one we're calling the 2.
Yeah.
Yep. So apparently there was a front run of whatever with the knot that was put on the sashes. We don't know of any of those off sash that are in mint condition. And then there was this next run where they took the knot off for whatever reason, and that's even more limited because you can't find those at all. And then there's the one with the scroll that doesn't break through and no knot, and that's the one that we collect most commonly.